Hello, I'm David Dzina, publisher at Pflaum. I'd like to welcome catechists, teachers, and program directors to this overview of the Pflaum Gospel Weeklies. I'm showing the homepage to our website. It can be accessed at pflaumweeklies.com or gospelweeklies.com. Either get you to the same page. And here you'll see all 5 levels of our program. Seeds for preschool, Promise for grades K through 1, grades 2 through 3 for Good News, Venture grades 4 through 6, and grades 7 through 9 for Visions. Your parish or school may assign different levels for a particular age group or grade level. These are the suggested grade levels for each of the 5 levels. For the purposes of this overview, I suggest that you have copies of the student lessons, the What the Church Believes and Teaches doctrinal handbook, your teaching guide for your level, and we will go through each of those components now. So here we have the student lessons for Promise, the What the Church Believes and Teaches doctrinal handbook for Promise, and the teaching guide for Promise. Those are the 3 components. You'll see the same also here for Venture, student lesson, What the Church Believes and Teaches handbook, and the teaching guide for Venture. Each level will have something very similar. So looking quickly at a Promise lesson, you'll see that the date for the week is found at the top. The week in the liturgical year, this is the 25th Sunday in Ordinary Time on September 20th. And you'll notice also that the bottom band of every lesson has the color for that week according to the liturgical year. And this is green for Ordinary Time. Seeds, Promise, and Good News have 4-page lessons. Venture and Visions have 8-page lessons. There are 8 lessons per unit for a total of 32 lessons for the entire year. 4 units, 32 lessons at 8 lessons each unit. And you will receive those lessons quarterly throughout the year. So here in this Promise lesson, there's a overview of the gospel. There's a nice activity here that you fill in and trace. And there's a closing prayer that can be sung and also uses sign language. Every lesson of every level has a family corner. These family corners include a question of the week, a family prayer. Every lesson of every level has the same question and the same prayer. So if a family has 2 or 3 children, they come home with their lesson for the week, the same question of the week, the same prayer appears in all of those levels for that lesson. Something new this year is a quote on the true presence in the Eucharist. This one is from St. Alphonsus. Every level, every lesson has a quote on the Eucharist. And this is to help families, help children, and a reminder for us catechists and teachers too, on the true presence of the Eucharist. You'll also notice that every lesson has a link to the doctrinal handbook. In Seeds and Promise, it's this very small box that the families can look up at home or you can use in class, however your program is set up. This one says to go to page 6 in the Catechism Handbook. So that would mean that you go to the What the Church Believes and Teaches handbook, and you turn to page 6, and there's your page. New for Seeds and Promise this year also are this new feature called the Word of the Week. This one is Bible. So now all 5 levels have some form of a faith word every week. Seeds and Promise has added this Word of the Week feature this year. Part of the Family Corner too, you'll see a scan here for parent resources. This is a QR code or a web address that goes right to the Gospel Weeklies for families to look up further information, to have parent pages if they're teaching lessons at home or helping teaching lessons at home, or weekly videos, and we'll show some of that a little bit later. Looking at your teaching guide, so again, you have the student lessons, doctrinal handbook, and teaching guide. You will receive a teaching guide for every quarter, and it lists all those 8 lessons that we talked about for this unit here. There's a QR code on the cover of each of the teaching guides that takes you right to the Catechist Teacher resource page on our website. We will go over that a little bit later. But it does highlight here a unit overview webinar. Every unit, our editors go through every lesson. So especially for new catechists, it's helpful to have an overview of how to teach each of the lessons. And I encourage you to watch those webinars. They are bookmarked, so you may skip to the lesson that you're about to teach. You don't need to watch the whole webinar at one time. When you open your teaching guide, the first 2 pages give an overview of the unit. A little background for your information. This talks about the new features here that I just explained. All of the great resources on our website, our weekly newsletter, the Grow blog. I encourage you to sign up for that. It gives you information about the coming week's lesson, and information about early start lessons that take place before the program begins as bonus lessons, using the music CDs, and then other additional resources like lesson assessments or seasonal resources and videos for every week. Then you have those 8 lessons spelled out here: the date, the Gospels, the Word of the Week, and then the 4 pillars of the Catechism on how the program corresponds to the doctrine of our faith. Then it gets into lesson-specific information. Here's the same lesson that I just presented to you from the student lesson. A great background for you, scripture background, connecting gospel and doctrine, and even how to share the lesson with families. Materials that you'll need for the class, suggested music from our music collection, and the music is available in CD form or as digital downloads. And then specific lesson resources to help you are activity books. Every lesson has an activity from our activity book that corresponds to the doctrinal theme that's presented in every lesson. A link to the lesson assessments, which are available for online, taking online, the child can do that at home. A PDF form that you can print out and give in class, or in a Word document if you wanted to change the questions or add some of your own. And then video links. There are several videos for every lesson that you can include as part of your lesson planning. Here we have 3 different ways the lesson can be presented. In a single session lesson plan, there are 2 different ways, and then over 5 days for Catholic school, making up the 3 different versions. So you have a 60-minute lesson, a 90-minute lesson, or a 5-day lesson plan. And these are all suggestions. Some people have programs that run shorter or longer than these times, and you can adjust accordingly. But it walks you through the 3 steps of the lesson: share experiences, discover gospel and doctrine, and live the gospel, with suggested pacing times for each section. And these are suggestions, again, especially for new catechists, to help you understand where the emphasis of time, where it should be placed in each lesson. You shouldn't spend so much time and share experiences that you don't have enough time to go over the gospel and doctrine and living the gospel section, for example. Also note that there's a reminder of when to go to the doctrinal handbook in the lesson. So the students have the weekly lesson, and then the content that never changes, the doctrine in the Catechism handbook, that is in a separate book and it tells you when to go and when to return to the lesson. You see that indication by the little icons that we have here. For schools, you also see, in addition to the 5-day pacing plan on how to use the lesson over 5 days, there's a curriculum connection that shows you how to integrate the themes of these lessons into other disciplines. And finally, extending the lesson. And this is helpful for not just Catholic schools, but also for parish programs. Extending activities, Seeds and Promise have additional content for each lesson. So the lesson can expand even beyond those 4 pages, plus the doctrinal handbook, by these other activities that you will find online. The Catholic Identity Project of the Week. While it could appear that these are for schools only, because you have the time to go through a project every week, some of the concepts, some of the ideas can also be used in a parish setting. And I encourage you to look at that as well. Then there's the saints and feast days to celebrate. Every week we highlight saints that are, the feast days are coming up, or any special holy days that may happen in the coming week. And then the 3 steps of the lesson. So if you're an experienced teacher, you get used to the pacing, you don't feel you need to look at the pacing plan. Of course, I do encourage you to take a look at it, especially the materials. But really, the whole lesson outline is on 2 pages. It's not too overwhelming for catechists and teachers. Every step has an objective or 2 that are covered for that step. Each step is color-coded. Share is in blue, Discover is in green, Live Gospel is in red. So in Share Experiences, you'll have an opening prayer, how to teach the opening activity and story. For Seeds and Promise, the script for the lesson story, will be in the teaching guide. Here, this is the script, and you'll see it in italics. For Good News, Venture, and Visions, the story is in the student lesson itself. For Discover Gospel and Doctrine, there'll be a gospel ritual that's built into the lesson, so you can have a procession or just some way to throw in the Bible during the reading of the gospel. And then there's music suggested too, and then the gospel itself. And here again is the script for the gospel in Seeds and Promise. Good News, Venture, and Visions, the gospel story will be in a role play format, typically in the student lesson. But you'll have information about teaching that gospel here in this Discover Gospel and Doctrine section. Then the reminder to go to the What the Church Believes and Teaches handbook. Just like in the student lesson, it said to go to the page. Here in the guide, it tells you, distribute the children's What the Church Believes and Teaches handbook. It tells you and gives you information. And then when you're done with it, it tells you to return to the student lesson. And then it closes with the word of the week, or in the upper levels, it would be the Catholic faith word, followed by the closing section in Live the Gospel, closing prayer, and a reminder for those extending activities. And finally, there's a lesson wrap-up that tells you when to incorporate the activity, the Black Line Master from the activity book, that again reinforces the doctrinal concept of the lesson. And that's it. Every lesson is set up the same way. We can take a quick look at Venture. And Venture and Visions follow a very similar format, and Good News is kind of somewhere in between. 4 pages for Good News, but the same kind of structure as Venture and Visions. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So again, you have the date, the week in the liturgical year, the liturgical color. There's a 2-page story that sets the theme for the gospel, the theme for the lesson. Good News would have a 1-page story, but again, the same kind of setup. Then here's the gospel for that Sunday. And it's again in role play format with discussion questions. These are the think questions for venture. Discover connecting gospel and doctrine together. Here it gives a summary of the gospel and how it ties to the doctrine. There's a link to the What the Church Believes and Teaches handbook. This says go to page 4 and then later to page 47. And your teaching guide does instruct you as well. Notice that the Catholic faith word that shows up on page 5 is highlighted here and in bold on page 4. So every faith word in Good News Venture and Visions will be highlighted and bold-faced and defined within the lesson. Page 5 expands on the doctrinal theme. It can have information about the liturgy, could be something on scripture, something that further expands on the doctrinal concept in the lesson. Here is that Eucharist quote that I spoke about in the promise level. Again, every level, every lesson has a Eucharist quote. And there's a saint that's covered here, St. Francis Xavier. Every lesson has an activity, a saint, or it could be a Q&A that expands on the theme. You'll see the With My Family and Friends, which is the older version of the Family Corner with the same content. We call it With My Family and Friends in the Venture and Visions levels instead of Family Corner. But it has that QR code and the web address for the families to go for their resources, and then Pray, Think, and Act, which have that question of the week, the prayer, and then an action item for the young people to work on. And then there's an activity, Living the Gospel, and this one is a cutout activity in the closing prayer here. So as I mentioned, the doctrinal link on page 4 to the What the Church Believes and Teaches handbook. This says to go to page 4 and then to page 47. So that's this handbook. You go to page 4, and the teaching guide will give you instructions of what to do here. And then also on page 47, the overview of the Mass, the parts of the Mass that's included as part of this lesson. For the teaching guide, again, very similar to Promise. I won't go over it entirely again. If you're skipping through this video and want to know about the teaching guide, for a deeper overview, go back to the section where I was talking about the Promise teaching guide. But again, I want to point out the QR code takes you to the Catechist teacher resource page on our website. Especially, I want to highlight the webinars that our editors work so hard on, and they go through every lesson and how to teach it with some great teaching tips. And you can skip to the lesson that you are about to teach. The video is bookmarked. A quick overview of the unit, the pacing plan, background, ways to extend the lesson, and then the teaching pages, including the 3 steps and the What the Church Believes and Teaches section. Noting, again, that page 4 and page 47, and how to teach all of that. And then how to return back to the lesson. Go to the Catholic faith word and continue on with the lesson. For the lesson wrap-up on Venture here, you'll see a reminder about the weekly assessment and also the activity book, the doctrinal activity that's available separately. And those are all the components that you will need to teach your lesson. Next, we will go to our website. So at pflaumweeklies.com or gospelweeklies.com, here is the main page. And I invite you to spend some time to explore the different features we have on this website. There are so many great resources for you as a catechist, as a teacher, as a program director. There's just so much here, and I couldn't spend all the time on it in this short video. But you would create your own account Parents do not need to do this, by the way. They can access the parent resources without any login information here. But your program director or religion coordinator or principal will have your parish's account number, and then with that account number, you can create your own account. And you see, when you go to browse, there's resources by level. You can select your level, resources in Spanish, resources for families, and that's in English or Spanish, catechists and teachers, which we're going to go over in a second, program directors, which has great resources, especially the Gospel for All Ages, which is our family catechesis program. If any part of your parish program or school program includes a family component, I encourage you to look at the Gospel for All Ages. That's found on the Program Directors tab. Online assessments in English or Spanish, and again, those are available in digital form where the child completes the assessment and then sends the results to you, or in a PDF format, or in a Word format where you can modify the test. The weekly videos, they are short videos that correspond to the themes or stories in a particular lesson. This is information on our music program, again, available in CD format or in as digital downloads. Those unit webinars that the editors record every unit for you to give you an overview of how to teach each lesson. The Grow blog, which is a weekly newsletter that our editors work on that give additional information, spiritual nourishment, and tips on how to teach the lessons coming up for that week. So for now, there's different ways to access all of this. Of course, you can click on the level that you're teaching, or what we're going to do here, click on Catechists and Teachers. And when you get to the Catechists and Teachers page, you see all the information that you would need here. Those unit overview webinars, when you click this, you can watch the webinar for your level. The teaching guides. The teaching guide that you have in print is also available free as a PDF online. So if you forget, you have a substitute catechist or teacher coming in, you don't have to give up your printed copy. You can send them the link or download the PDF and send them the teaching guide for that week. If you forget, or you want to just have it on your iPad, you can do it that way too. For those using our new online version of the Gospel Weeklies, there is a digital edition guide on how to set up your account to view the lessons and doctrinal handbooks digitally. That's in a separate site, and this shows you how to do that. Another way to access the assessments, the parent teaching pages, which is a new simplified version of your catechist teaching guide. This is especially helpful if parents are serving as main catechists this year, or if they are in a hybrid, if they're teaching some of the lessons, or if a child misses a lesson in class, the parent can use this as a way to help teach the child at home. New for this year, we have weekly gospel videos and coloring pages. There is a weekly gospel, they're around 6 minutes apiece, that after you read the gospel, either at home or in class, this video gives a summary of the gospel. It also features a saint of the week and also a closing prayer. So you can incorporate that into your lesson, especially for the Seeds and Promise levels. And you can see if you're teaching good news, if it's appropriate for that level too. We also have coloring pages tied to the themes of the gospel for that Sunday, and you would access that all here under Discover. Seasonal activities go through their free resources for the liturgical year, handouts, Blackline Masters, information that you can use to supplement your lessons. Program overview gives you a full review of the program. And then just additional information here about the handbooks, back to school prayers for the beginning of the year, If you're a new catechist especially, I encourage you to look at the resource manuals. Every level has a resource manual that gives you the entire background on your level, the childhood development, the age that you're teaching, how the program works, very lesson specific. And for program directors or religion coordinators or principals, we have under the program directors tab, there's one on the entire Gospel Weeklies program in a very similar way that walks through the entire program as a whole. So here you can look at the resources by level, which gives more details. So lots of different ways to explore. I just really encourage you to spend some time going through the website. The right-hand side has some quick links to some of the things I just showed you. And the readings for the Mass. If you wanted to do the actual readings from Sunday, you can click on this. Or the readings from the lectionary for Masses with Children. We'd have a link for that under Readings for Mass. Special Saints and Feast Calendar. Those Eucharist quotes. We also have reflections on those quotes that you can put in parish bulletins or in a newsletter for your class. They're set up in meme format, which are the quote with an image accompanying it. So lots of great information to extend that Eucharist quote beyond just seeing it in the student lesson. Again, a link to the videos, lots of different things. I encourage you to look through this. The other one to highlight here is the pacing plan. And this is helpful, especially for program directors. It shows you some of the main ways that the program can be taught. In a parish or school program, in RCIA, we have weekly RCIA links and correlations for the program. In family catechesis, you're teaching the program over the summer, lots of different ways. So I encourage you to, again, look through all of these different resources. Again, just to highlight quickly, the online assessments. We have online assessments for each lesson for Promise, Good News, Venture, and Visions. We have also unit assessments for the top 3 levels for Good News, Venture, and Visions. They're available in English and Spanish. And you would go to this online assessments, select your language, and then you go to this page. And it walks you through here all the things I'm saying, the different formats. There's also a lesson review template that if you prefer not to give a multiple choice or true or false assessment to the children, it's just a straight question and answer, like what was your favorite part about this lesson? Draw a picture about your favorite piece of the gospel story, and it's kind of open-ended. That's another way. That's in the lesson review templates. So you would click on your level. So let's try the venture level. And they're all set up the same way. So the pretest that appears for Good News, Venture, and Visions is an overview, kind of to get a sense of how much the child knows from past years. That's available online, PDF, or Word document, and then you only have access to the answers. When parents try to click on anything but the online assessment, they will not be able to access the other things. They'll require a login information, which only you have. And the same would apply for the answers. And here we have the unit assessments or the lesson assessments. So using the same example from earlier, if I click on online assessment for September 20th, it opens up. And then the child could write his or her name, and then the email that you designate, the email address that you designate, whether it's catechist or teacher, program director, if you create a parish email address that all the assessments get sent to, this is the address. You would instruct the child which email address to use. And at the end of the assessment, the results get sent to that email address. So in this case, their fill in the blanks. So they would type their answer after each of them, 5 questions for the lesson assessments, and then they submit, and then would get sent to that address. And then you would look at the answer key if you need to do that for the answers. But for the online assessments for the unit, it's a little bit different with the same kind of setup. You would put the name and address, then it reminds you so they're not putting their own email address in. And then you would hit start, and then it would take you to a multiple choice, true and false, fill in the blank, matching type of assessment. One last thing to show on the website are the resources for families. Again, this is open access for families. They don't need login information. The parent teaching pages are probably the best, most direct thing you can tell them to access on this, especially if they're teaching the lessons at home. And that is something that is new this year. If you have any questions, anything that you need or you're not sure about how the program works, anything content related, email me at editor@pflaum.com. If you have any questions about any problems logging into the digital version of the program, any problems with your order, anything that's sales related, you can contact customer service or your sales consultant. It's been a pleasure. I hope that this has been helpful. Again, if there's anything you need, just email me at editor@pflaum.com. Thank you, and God bless.